The question I'm going to talk about is why experimental therapies that are regarded in Europe as rogue and undeserving, why are they regarded as acceptable by researchers and patients in China? Many of the research enterprises in countries in Asia that engage in the provision of stem cell therapies are regarded here as wild Eastern approaches, unethical enterprises. This is usually said because these enterprises, these research organizations or hospitals charge fees of patients. If it's experimental stem cell research, you're not supposed to charge fees. After all, it's not a proven therapy, it's not evidence-based. Other reasons for regarding them as rogue is because there's a lack of independent research and ethics oversight. So we don't know whether the trials or the research is ethical. Another reason is, again, that there's no scientific evidence shared by the international scientific community that shows that these therapies are scientific and therefore effective. So there is a kind of ideal, typical differentiation between bona fide Western research trials and stem cell therapies and the rogue stem cell therapies that are being provided in other countries. Well, I'm going to talk about China, and I'm going to discuss this differentiation to show that this difference should not really be seen as a dichotomy. The situation, the issue is far more complicated than the question would presume. After all, globally seen, there is a great variety of experimentation going on. There is scientific experimentation, there are clinical studies that are experimental. Of course, there's also straight quackery when any kind of cells are being injected into patients' body. But there's also, we know in Europe, the hospital exemption. In the United States, there are forms of clinical trials, principally PI-led research that are also experimental, and some of which can also charge money. So that there is worldwide a great variety of spaces in which research is being experimented, and in various configurations patients are asked to recruit in this form of experimentation. What we do in our research is that we use the concept of bionetworking in order to find out or to understand better how research leads to either scientific or non-scientific research results. This bionetworking concept refers to the myriad of activities and conditions necessary to make biomedical products, whether they are scientific or not. This concept helps us to understand how scientists and medical entrepreneurs interact with and strategically alter the contextual factors and circumstances that underlie scientific projects. And the case that I'll be illustrating of Baker Biotech, which is a well-known company in China, providing therapies already in the past, over 15,000 therapies have been provided of all kinds to patients with spinal cord injury, muscular dystrophy, MS, well, you name it. But I'm going to show this example to show why, according to many researchers, most of the researchers that have not been abroad much, believe that these kind of therapies are actually acceptable. I make a distinction between the externalization and the internalization of local factors. Well, we've seen in Catherine's talk that CROs, clinical research organizations, they usually externalize the local factors because sometimes you are confronted with a local population that's maybe not educated or has got lives in circumstances that are not conducive to the conditions of the trial. So you have to exclude these factors in order to get a standardized result. But this often means that the end product, the medicine, the drugs, the therapy, will not be available at affordable cost for the local patients. Whereas rogue experimental stem cell trials and research are not standard. Actually, the researchers in these circumstances use the local factors to make the therapies acceptable and also available. Often in a country like China, many of the patients do not have really much access to healthcare, affordable healthcare, and instead of that, they often participate in trials or they buy certain therapies. So the internalisation of the local allows experimental stem cell therapies to take advantage of regulatory, infrastructural, healthcare, political, cultural and economic factors that differ across countries. So if you have a company providing stem cell therapies, you look at the regulation of various countries, the affordability of therapies to patients, the kind of healthcare insurance people have in a certain country, and then you decide where you're going to recruit your patients and what you're going to offer. So that's what the Bionetworking is about. Everything in between the production, the training, the management, and the end product, the science or the non-science product, is the Bionetworking that goes before that. Well, my argument is here that rather than looking at the ethics of supply, we also have to look at the demand. So much attention has been to rogue companies, the exploitation of vulnerable patients and fraudulent therapies, but we need to have put more emphasis on how market provision responds to healthcare demands and acts on health needs and living conditions. So we need to understand how knowledge of exchange conditions in different countries facilitate experimental stem cell therapies. So we need to go beyond the view that the differences between good and bad therapy provision is a matter of money, ethics and evidence-based science. So theories focusing on exploitation and therapeutic fraud as drivers of experimental therapies do not sufficiently take into account the interaction of patients, companies and governments. So the example of biotech is one of a rogue company. It has often been argued that this company is actually an example of a multinational success that has been successful because of its exploitation of international stem cell tourism and local healthcare needs. The example shows, my point, I don't want to repeat it here because I think we're short for time. But it shows how Baker Biotech manages its reputation, its production of knowledge, and its other assets within China. Baker Biotech is a company based in Shenzhen, in the south of China. It was set up by a man called Xiang Hu in 1999. Xiang Hu stayed in the United States for a long time. In Canada he got his PhD, and he started to think about organizing experimental stem cell therapies in a place called Zhengzhou, where there are also many CROs based. He set up his company with capital from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Zhengzhou University and Beijing University. But these universities have high reputation. So how is it possible that he could set up such a company that really has been criticized such a lot by scientists abroad? It produces adult stem cell products from umbilical cord, cord blood and bone marrow stem cells. It processes cells for the use of treating serious medical conditions, including brain injury, cerebral palsy, diabetic foot, etc. And it does so through contracts with hospitals in China. So they pay, the hospitals get a cut of the profits and the patients are sent to these hospitals. This makes it it protects it from any kind of criticism it could get from the public or from the government if the government decided to close down such hospitals. In China, any kind of this kind of rogue therapy, any kind of stem cell therapy would be forbidden according to notifications that have been published last year, this year, and many times before. But in practice, there has not been very much implementation of this policy. In Taizhou, which is near Shanghai, there is also a large facility and a stem cell bank, which is a central research zone for China's regenerative medicine. It's based in China Medical City, also the birthplace of former President Hu Jintao, and attracts lots of foreign researchers and companies and also patients. Baker Biotech also has got various contracts with provincial umbilical cord blood banks. So you think that a rogue stem cell provider like Baker Biotech, how comes it can collaborate with the government if the therapies that they provide are forbidden? Well, now to try and put this into perspective, charging fees in China is not so unusual. Therapies falling outside China's local healthcare provision list are commonly sold on a commercial basis. Total healthcare insurance coverage is rare. Bribery is also quite common in order to create goodwill with the doctors, and patient choice of medical doctors is a right for which many patients nevertheless pay extra. Foreign patients that come to China for therapy often pay twice as much as the Chinese. So this makes it very attractive for the local patients that think that it's excellent therapy that's being provided. Apart from that, all the elite laboratory that doing this research, organizing clinical trials, have not been given permission by the government already since a few years. So foreign criticism says that the scientists who have been abroad says that foreign scientists say that Baker Biotech doesn't keep its records. It's not open for checking whether there actually has been progress made on the patients. Foreign critics also say that unproven therapies are being provided and they make use of the placebo effect. And it's also been said that hardly any of the therapies being provided are based on evidence-based medicine. However, lately Baker Biotech has been earning so much that they've been able to do their own research. They produce now papers that you can find in international journals. And apart from that, even though scientists abroad say that the science that's being used is not evidence-based, the Chinese researcher says, well, the science that's being based, it's also not been proven that it doesn't work. So the argument has been turned around. So, according to the researchers in China and the patients, foreign criticism is actually an expression of jealousy of the freedom that they have to do this kind of research and therapy provision. Baker's website has a wealth of patients' case studies, so it looks like it's an excellent organization. Patient records now are kept, but not open for audit. And the researchers say, well, of course not, because we need to keep patient confidentiality. And apart from that, there are IPR reasons for doing this. The Taizhou Industrial Group, which Baker Biotech is part of, has links with Fudan University, Huazhong Science and Technology University, Nanjing, Jiangsu, Shanghai Jiaotong University. All of these have extremely high reputations. So no one in China would think that going there would be a bad idea, apart from the people that have been abroad for a long time and have been influenced by or have been receiving ideas about Baker abroad. Apart from that, Baker gets state support through the provinces, but also indirectly through grant applications. Just to show how, well, this is what people in China see. This is their headquarters. Ex-President Hu Jintao and Premier Wen Jiabei went to Baker Biotech visited this facility, spoke with Hu Xian, the establisher of Baker Biotech, and complimented it, hoped that in the future it would be extremely successful, and that China's hope was invested in them. Baker Biotech produces lots of international journal articles, even though it has been criticized because not all the articles are directly by Baker personnel. It got many patents. Patents in China are extremely important to have. On that basis you can get a promotion, even though the patent, as we all know, doesn't have to be used or be useful. It has lots of certifications, among others the internationally highly valued AABB certification for biobanks. Now one of the 2 organizations in China that has that. So my conclusion is that Baker's internalizing of local factors in producing experimental stem cell therapy shows how Baker's therapies have become acceptable in China. And it shows strategies based on the knowledge of difference in science and health infrastructure at home and abroad, including data on the availability of science, expertise and knowledge, IPR, patient population, communication and transport, healthcare provision, education and regulation. So although experimental stem cell therapies are legitimized in terms of scientific evidence, research protocols and bioethics, its drivers are fueled by the demands of patients, funding, regulation of governments, knowledge assets and international knowledge of differences in therapy conditions. Thank you for listening.